Is AI better than human? I'm going to remind you, the point of every tool we've ever made that we've kept around, every good tool makes us better, right? Us plus the tool.
Cassie Kozyrkov,
CEO, Google's first chief decision scientist, AI advisor, decision strategist, and keynote speaker.
AI systems is their creator plus them doing the task at scale. Oh, now think about it. Like, there's some person who, let's say, at Google, some person at Google built some systems. They make subjective decisions along the way and judgments as they shape these systems. Now these systems affect billions of lives. Don't forget that there was a human there that made all those choices, that created the system. It is them plus the system that's now doing all the things you enjoy or don't enjoy as a result.
Hello, I'm excited to be talking with you and maybe getting my brain rearranged. Thank you, Cassie. You've already taught me a lot about how to make better decisions. And I thought maybe a great place to begin today's discussion, if I can put you on the spot to relate something you taught me long ago about times when I can make a better decision, not by being better informed, but by actually restricting my access to information. Like if we're thinking about how to improve decision-making quality, what are the times when to improve your decision-making ability, you actually want to guard against seeing certain kinds of data? How does that work?
Awesome. Well, first, Michael, you're making it sound like I am the guru of making you make worse decisions.
You're my guru.
So, I'm your guru of, I'm like, I'm trying to remember which one we did like that. But
oh, right.
Yeah, so I'm very happy to dive into this. And where I like to start is I've studied decision-making for way too long across numerous disciplines. And I'm always so inspired by the particular name that the discipline of psychology gave its decision-making subject. And there they call it judgment and decision-making. And for the listeners here, take a moment, take a beat. What is judgment? What is decision-making? Are they two different things? Are they the same things? As I'm rambling here, I'm hoping that you have a definition for judgment. Do you have a definition for judgment, Michael? I'm to put you on the spot.
Okay, I'm going to take this in maybe a weird way. I was born in California. I grew up Californian. And in my childhood Californian culture, judgment is a bad thing. Like being judgy is like really considered to be like a form of harming someone. And so it didn't occur to me later until I'll go so far as to say I became a New Yorker, that I came to think of how having good judgment literally means, being wise. And so there's something there that's actually like really important that I was almost raised in denial of. But what, now to get to your question, so one of the things I think of that separates judgment from decision-making is the critical aspect of discernment in judgment. It seems like judgment is critically about differentiating. And that I would say is a input into the like finality of commitment that I think of as what a decision is.
So I love this. And wow, we were just talking earlier about drawers within drawers within drawers. So we're just going to pull open all these drawers and we see if we close them at the end. But okay, I love how you pulled another one out, which is that a mistake for folks not used to the social sciences. A mistake is to do this really weird thing where we expect that words have to mean the same thing to everybody regardless of context. Language is fluid. You can use it how you like. The word judgment could mean whatever it likes to you. It could mean something else to me. And for us to be understood, we have to define our terms. We have to say, when I say this, here's what I mean. And what I find really, really funny on the internet, to open another drawer, is that some of the most mathematical folks, the AI nerds that I spend a lot of time working with, they're so guilty of this. They've got this beautiful mathematics background, And then when it comes to something that we call operationalization in psychology, and I'm going to make people think I'm a psychologist. I'm more of a statistician, actually. I spent more time there. But let's hang with psychology for a bit. Operationalization is essentially saying, here's what I mean. When I use the word judgment, this is what I intend by this word. And in a way that we can actually study it and measure it. Because in psychology, if we were all like, oh, memory means something to me and it means something else to you, we never get anywhere. It wouldn't be a science. So defining your terms is important. And yet these folks who spend, and this is the beautiful irony, they go through their training learning that you can write at the top of your page, let X equals whatever you like. And then I'm allowed to use X one way. You're allowed to use X another way. We don't have to fight about it. I don't immediately assume that your X is my X just because we both use the same letter of the alphabet. And yet these same folks who've got years and years of experience in this think, oh, well, user happiness, when you studied it, it means the same thing as what pops into my head when I see this word. No, folks, operationalize. So first, it's beautiful that we took a moment to talk about what judgment could mean. It could be a negative thing, again, in the context of your upbringing. It could mean wisdom. In psychology, it has a very particular meaning. And all of these meanings are simultaneously valid, as are all the other ones that have come into our listeners' ears in this moment that we asked. But the one in psychology is about deciding how to decide. So the judgment piece is about meta-heuristic selection. In other words, how are you going to approach your decision? What are you optimizing for? What is important here? And so coming back to the original prompt, because I promised I would close the drawers in the end, is that in some sense, once you have completed the judgment piece, there is a way to execute your decision and perhaps get something optimal by spending a lot of time and effort and energy, right, pursuing this procedure. But maybe you did the judgment step poorly because you overinvest the effort in the first place, saying that you want to put a lot of effort and optimize something where just the entire thing is worthless to you. So what I'm saying is when the effort doesn't actually match what you get out of the decision, you shouldn't spend so much time on optimizing it. And that is a failure of judgment, not a failure of decision-making according to the psychology definition. You might have optimized perfectly, but even spending the effort optimizing was a bad call. That problem happened in how you selected your approach in the first place. And the way that you select your approach really does have to take into account your priorities, what's important to you, what's at stake. It has to be sensible. We often see these types of situations. In fact, a Nobel Prize winner in the history of psychology and economics, Herb Simon, is the father of this concept called satisficing rather than optimizing, where he points out, look, we humans, with that little brain, if we would be attacked by a lion on the savannah and we optimized our most perfect way of escaping the lion, we did all the calculations and worked out all the angles, by the time that would have happened, the lion would eat us. So there's something wrong with, it doesn't serve the objective to compute perfectly. But in a much broader sense, if you zoom out a bit, you often see that it's optimal in a broader sense. So in some ways we are optimizing, we're just maybe not having the right perspective. When we're zoomed in, we're like, well, why did you do it so badly here? Because if you zoom out to the entire organism, it makes survival sense. Or maybe you zoom out to the entire species, maybe it makes species level sense. So as I look more and more at this stuff, I feel like maybe we've also operationalized success incorrectly when we say, this is what's optimal. So it's all about perspective.
I've been influenced in this regard by David Chapman, who himself was channeling Kegan and Kegan's developmental theory of adult development and development in sophisticated reasoning going through certain stages of abstraction. It seems so important to help people be systematic thinkers, that a tremendous amount of effort goes into teaching the sort of basics of systematization. Whereas earlier you were speaking about this wise or or fluent choice making about what kind of heuristics to bring to bear, right? Like, how should we even frame this problem before we then go about tackling it? So this is something that Chapman termed meta systematicity, a higher level of choosing what the appropriate system is for this particular situation. And there seems to be something almost ineffable about this. It's hard to communicate that this is itself a skill that can be sort of logically acquired, since this freedom, this higher level of choice making above one, whatever the first style of systematization you had installed in your brain is, the idea that one can go higher is something that perhaps is as foreign as the 3D world is to the characters in Flatland.
Do you think, Cassie, kind of to build on what Michael's saying, do you think that bringing in perspectives from different systems, so for example, if you're an engineer trained in electrical engineering, you're going to look at a system differently than a chemical engineer, right? Do you think that applies similarly to our personal lives? Like, is there something that we could learn from the animal kingdom, like you said, for example, or maybe from how New Yorkers walk on the street, that kind of thing?
I'm sure. I'm sure of it. And so it was one of my closest friends' birthday 2 days ago. So I'm reminded of being 18, hanging out with her in college. And she was trying to figure out whether or not to break up with her boyfriend. And I, a economics senior at the time, economics and statistics, as she was telling me all these emotional things, what came out of my mouth was, right, let's do a cost-benefit analysis. Now,
fabulous.
As ridiculous as that sounds, that was actually a pretty helpful thing for her. And it caught her by surprise. She doesn't expect to hear such a thing in the context of analyzing relationships, but a helpful model. And cost-benefit, of course, not in terms of vulgar things, but emotions. What kind of happiness are you getting out of this? What are the good things here? What are the bad things here? Let's have a look.
That's amazing. And I actually read one of your articles, and I don't know if it relates to this. All of your articles are amazing. I just kind of went down a rabbit hole on media. Yeah. There was one that you said that not all decisions should be made just purely mathematically, and they should have some sort of qualitative piece to it as well, I think is what you said. Correct me if I'm wrong. But this kind of is an example of that, right? Like the emotional piece. Are there other types of this kind of data that we might not necessarily think to include in our everyday decision-making, you think?
Yeah. Well, first, I feel like I should slightly defend myself against those listeners who might have misinterpreted what you attributed to me. And that is, there are absolutely some decisions that don't require an emotional component. In some sense, it also depends how we define decision. Decision scientists would define a decision as an irrevocable allocation of resources. But you could have an irrevocable allocation of resources, like basic automation, if the sensor determines that there's some particular level of chemical in the mix, then put in this amount of chemical. And you can't pull them apart. Entropy sucks, I guess. But that's an irrevocable allocation of resources, but I don't think we want to be doing that emotionally every time, wondering how we feel about the level of bleach or something, right? That's not what we're doing. That said, the things that are important to us, when we dig into our why, into bigger questions in our lives, why are we even selling this product that involves bleach somewhere there in the process? That why will tend to have a human component. And if we forget about that human component, if we really try to be as robotic as possible, what we're doing is leaving data on the table. Data that only exists in your internal environment, that no sensor outside you will pick up. So it's that kind of argument that I'm making.
Right. I think that's an extremely important insight for today, because so much of the attention on improving decision-making seems to be almost taking the human considerations out, specifically citing them as untrustworthy, as sources of like pollution, of sources of bias that must be removed in order to get to a true result, which is therefore somehow a cold analytical result.
Yes, though perhaps the enforced absence of them is more of a bias. Again, it all depends on what we're doing and what we're trying to achieve and for whom. And I also really want to caution people against reading too much into the history of the data sciences as predictive of their future. There have been a lot of low-hanging fruit problems. Like, hey, look, there's a bunch of data, and there is so much of it, and it is so easy to interpret, and it really helps this problem that has not had a solution before. Wow, data. That doesn't translate into the external world data is the most relevant thing for all problems, that it's even possible to get the right data to solve every problem.
Are there any situations in which you shouldn't be consulting data at all?
Well, when the data that exists is worse than an absence of data, absolutely. I mean, yeah, imagine that maybe there's a type of music that you absolutely detest, but no one except you knows about it. And if we were to pick a song at random for you, that you might like it, you might not like it. But if we put a lot of data of just those songs that you detest into the system, then there's a much higher probability that what you get is useless to you. In fact, what we call a lot of data that's useless to you is noise. Noise is not good. You prefer a much smaller collection of songs that are relevant and useful, as opposed to an enormous collection of cacophony. More bad data is not better. And so a very classic, for the data scientists listening, a very classic graduate level interview question is, whoa, I have this model and I add a bunch of data and the model gets worse. What gives? That's what gives. Noisy data, high variance, mess, bad stuff, a lot of bias, a lot of variance. It will mess up your results. It's worse than if you just stuck with less data. And the thing is, for some situations, the data is entirely in your internal environment, and you have to be asking yourself, how do I want to make this decision? Quite often, nothing in the external environment would be relevant for your decision. And so, to go straight to the spicy one, well, you don't hear about you don't hear about a lot on tech podcasts, but let's just call it out. Religious beliefs, belief in God. Regardless of whether I do or don't have beliefs in God, what I have a strong belief in is that it is a fool's errand to attempt to convince anyone of something that differs from their own views. There is no data out in the world that should be relevant for most religious framings. There's nothing out there that'll help you. There's no common language that you could have between a believer and non-believer. So there's no point in continuing. There's no data for that.
I like that. The interpretive framework for even approaching those questions has it. You can think of it as like being downstream of a bunch of choices of priors or principles. And after that choice making comes observations about the world. And you have to understand that that's the actual order of operations. So the observations are, let's call it, ontologically post these deep questions about the existence or lack of existence of God.
Yeah, exactly. And if you think about us human creatures, we are already born with some machinery in place, some hardware. So it's not like we're choosing our priors at random. Mm-hmm. So exactly as you say, the data follows.
So speaking of our genetic inheritance as primates, we're so far the winningest primates in tool creation. And when I think about bringing to bear tools to help my decision making, there's like computational tools that are simply helping me calculate in ways that like my meat space brain is not so good at. But what I've been particularly obsessed with, and of course is a focus of this podcast, is how do we augment our intelligence and augment our inputs? Like, is there a way to harness technology to actually surface inputs into the decision-making or the commitment process that are otherwise very hard to like consciously track, but very easy for machines to? That's why I'm wearing this watch. It's because I don't want to make the cognitive investment in like keeping track of my heart rate. I do want to reflect at the end of my day or at the end of my week about what sent my heart racing. So I have this symbiotic relationship where this is just an input into the analytical framework and calculations that I'm actually doing up here. How are you augmenting yourself? What are the inputs that you've incorporated in your life that now you don't want to give up?
Happy to share, because I'm a weirdo. But first, just on behalf of tool using apes everywhere, can I just push back on this word symbiotic? What on earth is that, Michael?
Okay.
Yeah, no symbiosis. We're
oh my God, because it wasn't two-way.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, we're tool using apes.
Point.
These are our apes. These are our apes. These are our objects. We built them. We use them. And please, anybody listening, that goes all the way through until we have really cool robot tools. They are still our tools. And please don't have these, attend rallies to give them rights of some kind.
Yes.
That's just
not
beyond the pale. That's like
that's
taking a pet rock and asking what its feelings are. Like, don't be doing that except for your amusement quietly where no one can hear you, please, because we don't want to base policy on your feelings about your pet rock. So yes, no symbiosis. We're awesome tool using apes. And I love when you get this cognitive realism approach where you're just like, right, what can I not do? What I can't do is remember my heart rate on Tuesday when I think about it now. And actually, on this topic, if there are listeners who, if you've got this sense of like, there's something magical about data, I really want to disabuse you of this notion. So I want to assign homework to the listeners. Okay, so here's your homework.
Okay.
I want you to pick, let's call it 10 things. 10 things about your day that are of some interest to you. Like maybe it's bedtime, maybe it's hydration. How many cups of water did you drink? Maybe you give yourself a score for something about your fitness. I don't know. How many math books did you read? You know the drill. So 10 of them or so. And then I want you to spend a month filling that thing out. A few of you will do it perfectly and really wonder what the point of the exercise was. The rest of you will learn something deep about yourselves and data. First, that it comes from humans. A lot of the time, it sucks because after you'll like skipped a day, maybe you skipped 2 days, and you're like, what was my mood on Wednesday? I don't know. And the longer you persist in doing that, right? Start collecting your data, but believing that you are a reliable narrator of a past that you don't even remember. The more you are going to contribute to, well, bad data, if you will. Now, I told Michael I was a weirdo. I have, since I was 17, collected, I keep these spreadsheets, I enjoy doing this, data about myself, these types of things. How many cups of water did I drink? How much sleep did I get? Now that there's an Oura, and I felt like at one point I was like, I should take off my Oura before I go in front of camera because, they're not sponsoring me. Hey, Oura, maybe you should sponsor it. Anyway, but this is a wonderful fix to the fact that if you ask me how much sleep I had last week, my memory is bad. But with some cognitive realism, I'm great at many things, but remembering how much I slept last week, that's not my strong suit. Like, let me do something else, like hang out with my friends and talk. I'm better at that. So I've begun to rely on those tools, and I've thought about where are the holes in my memory? Where are the holes in my cognition? Memory is definitely one of them. And how do I harness as many of the tools that we have and maybe build new ones as possible to do better? So I've got my sleep tracking. I still do some kind of manual entry. But it's better when we get tools for this. And I know that you're building some of these tools, Michael. At some point, maybe we will together have you give me a system that will actually keep me hydrated. Because I was like, I was strong this weekend.
Working it.
And now these past 2 days, I'm doing like 5 or 6 cups and I'm disgusted with myself. But yeah, I track all kinds of stuff. And speaking of that, tracking is not enough. You need a way to use that data to actually alter or influence your decision making. So I've been on a very particular diet. I've actually not shared this with anyone. So my diet, it's a very simple diet. I take photographs of everything that I eat. Nobody hack me because this is going to be an interesting data set. I take photographs of everything that I eat, and then once a week I go through and I ask myself, do I like on the order of a week? Do I approximately like how I'm living my life, or maybe should I prioritize some green things next week, right? Just these little nudges. And that, to me, that's the whole thing. Just take photographs, see how we're doing, more greens, more protein, less protein, because I don't have time for any kind of obsessive whatnot. Maybe at some point I'll do more with it, but for now, living my life. Without those photos, I wouldn't know. I actually started doing that when I was doing a lot of client work, and at some point I'm like, wow, how many steaks, foie gras, and wine in a row can you have before like your liver just exits? Just like, no, I don't want to be part of this body anymore. So yeah, and you don't remember, like in the moment, you're like, oh, this is a unique, fun thing that I'm doing at this nice dinner that I have the opportunity to attend. This is special, like it was in the college days. Except that now it's every day. And without kind of tracking and without thinking about how you think and how you take in information and what ways you're going to do it wrong, you don't have the opportunity to use the tools as a tool using Ape. You fix all that. So anyway, it's a big series of praises to us as a species when we have that ingenuity to find solutions.
I want to double down on praising and praise specifically this diet strategy because it lacks a feature that most diets have. In my view, most diets are orthorexic. They're a system of rules that you can achieve 100% compliance with, or like a math test, you can get points marked off. So in effect, most diets are systems for rating yourself critically as flawed. Because you like every time you don't follow the rules is essentially a defect of the system, and it's crazy. It's just crazy to live your life in such a way that there's like you have this self-imposed failure conditions. So I a kind of pet like game of mine is lifestyle design that has no failure conditions. Your diet has no failure condition. It is a system of reflection, and then you can ask yourself about what you want to do next week, but it's not like a pre-commitment to which you are going to be like marking yourself off in red pen. And I think that makes it a hell of a good diet. So I just wanted to praise that almost hidden feature of your design.
Thank you. And people think I'm taking Instagram photographs of my food. It's awfully embarrassing. That's the worst part of this diet. I'll be with some, in polite company and sort of take my phone out and just do something. Be like, I swear I'm not putting it on Instagram. You guys could check my Instagram account, listeners. It's Decision Leader. No food on there.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Unless you have a secret Instagram account, that is just for the food.
All food. Yeah, exactly. Food, right. Food diet, photo, whatever. Yeah, exactly.
I have a fasting design that works this way. So the way I fast is, I'll fast with a fasting buddy, and either of us can break the fast for any reason or no reason, and then we'll just fast again at 10x however long we fasted. So We fast for a day. Okay, we'll fast again in 10 days. Theoretically, we could fast for 1 minute, see a jelly bean, break the fast, and start again in 10 minutes. So you see, there's no true failure mode. No matter how you do it, you will fast for 10% of a year. And you just sort of discover, like sometimes we fast for 3 days, sometimes for 1, sometimes for 5.
Wait, does that follow that you fast for 10% of a year? Or could you just critically take the limit to some bad condition?
That's right. So in the,
I can break any diet. Any diet is breakable.
Okay. So I'm glad we're going there, because in the limit, obviously, the way that this reductios to absurdum is like the 1 minute fast, right? So I actually think that there is a proof of the orthorexification of everything in the redefinition of fasting to mean intermittent fasting, which is eating every day. So in the Michael Tiffany view of the universe, it is crazy town to call any practice that involves literally eating every single day fasting. This is crazy. This is a crazy redefinition of what fasting means. Okay. So like if you accept that kind of extreme view, then intermittent fasting is actually the opposite of fasting. It's a really strict adherence to scheduled eating, right? That is the very thing that I was criticizing before. It's like a system of constraints that you can only fail at. And I actually think that there must be something somehow psychologically compelling about adopting a system of constraints that you can only fail at, because we just see that as a innovative human like pattern over and over again, right? Like in our lifetimes, intermittent fasting was invented. Why? Fasting already exists. It is crazy that we are making this new system that like is so weird. And then, and then calling it fasting. So
can I jump in on that a little bit? Because there's a little piece of the intersection between economics and the decision sciences with respect to dieting that I find fascinating. Yeah, and I agree with you about the orthorexification, and this might actually surprise people like me, a data scientist by training, a statistician by training, a lover of data, a tracker of all kinds of things, that I don't actually do that, this point systems. Like, yeah, you trying to shove data where it doesn't belong into decisions where it doesn't belong is not a good thing, right? Like, make decisions well, that's the idea, and wisely, with wisdom, good judgment. So, absolutely. But what I was fascinated by in grad school when I was studying the science of self-control was an economics take on approaches to dieting and what goes wrong. And look, nobody knows if this is how humans work. It's just like a cool theory to digest. But the concept is that instead of seeing it as a single self who is going on a diet and then failing and going on a diet and then failing, what if it's multiple selves? And you look at this thing called the principal agent problem in economics. And the principal agent problem, it is not about dieting. It's about that the owners of a business, the shareholders, may be different from its managers, its executives. And so the principal is that's the name for the owner or shareholder, and the agent, that's the executives that run the business. And the idea is that these two entities may have two different sets of incentives. So perhaps the executive wants to make a very large bonus and have as much vacation time as possible and prestige and like hang out on the beach or whatever. Whereas the shareholders want the company to do well, make a profit, do good in the world, whatever it is that they want. And there could be a divergence. But the agent has their hands on the steering wheel. So what do we do? And how does this apply to the diet side of things? So here, the idea is, what if there are multiple selves, a long-run self that cares about the quality of your long-run utility, your happiness over your life, and a short-run self that is just alive for today. And the thing is that the short one is the one that's in control of your body. So the long run one says, I want to be the kind of person who goes to the gym, who eats well, who hydrates, right? Cassie says, I want to be hydrated every day. And, that's a point system thing that I fail at all the time. I want 8 glasses of water. For some reason, don't make it, but sometimes I do. This weekend was great. And so the long run says, well, hydration's important, a diet or exercise, whatever it is. But then the short one has emails to write, better things to do than to drink water, get up and get a glass of water, or, be on a diet. And then if you look at these two things, you would be like, well, the short one, that is the executive or the agent. And the long run self, that's like the principle in economics. So can economics give us some ideas about what to do if you have this divergence of incentives? And essentially, there are 2 strategies. Strategy 1 is try to align their incentives somehow. So can you create legal contracts and negotiate so that their incentives come together? And this would be the kind of strategy in an exercise setting, for example, where you're like, well, the long-term one wants to be fit, but the short-term one doesn't think going to the gym is fun. Can we make going to the gym fun? Can we find a more fun type of exercise that brings the incentive functions together? But quite often things do pull in the opposite direction. Like, the one that wants a candy bar, like how do you make a bowl of spinach as fun as a candy bar? Like, that's kind of hard. So instead, what happens in economics, you lock the agent out of being able to make decisions that the principal wouldn't want. Because the principal has an advantage over the agent, doesn't refresh frequently, right? Sticks around. And so you can do something to lock your future self, potentially, out of making decisions that you don't want. So I find this a fascinating theory. Again, who knows? Humans are complicated. I actually was having a way out the deep end debate with a friend of mine that I was speaking to right before you, Michael, when we were talking about are selves consistent? Is there such a thing as a constant sense of self? Are you multiple selves at once? Maybe you should think of your current self and your future self as relatives, and you're like parenting your future self. I know it's out there. That's what happens towards the end of the day, right? We start in the morning, we're talking about AI, and as the day goes on, you get this other stuff, and then diets with you. But what are your feelings about the principal agent problem as applying to self-control?
As a Buddhist, I am strongly skeptical of a self-consistent self. I think this is mostly a backward-facing fiction. Things happen in multiple dimensions all the time, and we retroactively construct a linear narrative and sort of posit a consistent self that is compatible with that narrative. But we just make this up, in my opinion. In fact, I will even go so far as to say that I welcome listeners to try your homework. I think it's a great suggestion. And one of the insights I predict that anyone who tries that homework will come to is not just about data science and data quality and constructing non-noisy time series. It's that your sense of like accuracy about your own self-narrative is itself just totally illusory. You're just making that up, filling in a lot of gaps, just the way vision works, right? You're moving your eyes around a lot and constructing the scene, even though you're actually only seeing about this much at any one time.
I was going to say, I was just thinking, because we're talking about humans and how we're built. Is there situations where you've seen that gut instinct outperforms data-driven decisions? And what have you learned from that?
Oh, of course. Again, I have to challenge the concept of data. What is data? We have to make sure that we agree or operationalize. A lot of people, when they think of the word data, they think stuff that's written down, and often they think it's in electronic form, and they have this impression that it lives in the internet and so on. Before there was the electronic form of data, data was recorded in notebooks, right? You could still do that. Then before that, it was passed along verbally, taken in through our senses. Right? Visually, it was passed along. And That's encoded in our wetware, which is unreliable, but it is still data. And so the question could always be, is there something, some memory that is stored that is such good data that even if you corrupt it a little bit, it's still better than the best uncorruptible, because that's what you get with the electronic form or the pen and paper, and the best uncorruptible data. If what you have in memory form is better than all that other stuff, then why would you use the worst thing? So in some sense, everything is data-driven, right? You're not behaving haphazardly. It's not totally random. You're consistent with yourself. It's just that it's encoded in there as opposed to in pen and paper. And I do want to say, for people who have this temptation to ask, is AI better than human? I want to remind you, the point of every tool we've ever made that we've kept around, every good tool makes us better, right? Us plus the tool. AI systems is their creator plus them doing the task at scale. Oh, now think about it. Like, there's some person who, let's say, at Google, I was at Google, some person at Google built some systems. They make subjective decisions along the way and judgments as they shape these systems. Now these systems affect billions of lives. Don't forget that there was a human there that made all those choices, that created the system. It is them plus the system that's now doing all the things you enjoy or don't enjoy as a result. And so in that way, remember, pen and paper has better memory than you. Your memory sucks. Pen and paper is better. You know what's even better? Making that searchable with electronic form, right? That's electronic data. But when the thing you wrote down is good in the first place. So I hear people go, oh, ha ha, if it's written in a book, it must be true. Like that's a joke. And then, without missing a beat, totally straight face, data never lie. It's the same thing. A book is a data set. We wrote some stuff down. A data set's a data set. Some idiot could have written the wrong thing down in there. A sensor could have been malfunctioning. Or you just missed what was important. You wrote something down, but it wasn't what was worth knowing. And maybe your experience over life was much more appropriate to the situation. And when we talk about intuition or going with your gut, what could possibly be driving that? I mean, if you are spiritual and you believe in spirit, that's a whole nother conversation. I'm going to stick to the two other possibilities. One, it is instinct, as in that hardware and software were loaded before you were born. Or, number two, you learned it somewhere. In other words, it's memory. Some data was integrated. And perhaps it is more relevant to the task than whatever else. Or maybe you can just access it faster than processing all the data, even if the data is good. But you don't have time to do that calculation of how to run away from that lion on the savannah. Well, maybe you just gotta run and trust your instinct and not sit there computing. So this distinction of like data, capital D, is always better. It just weirds me out. Like, some people needed to sell data to the market, sell cloud and hardware and all that, and taught us to pronounce data with a capital D. Like, why are we doing this? Possibly good, possibly bad. Try the homework.
Yeah. Going back to also machines and how we are the ones who create them, therefore our biases can be translated into those machines as well. Do you think that those machines can then undo that same bias if they're aware of that, or if we make them aware of that?
Oh, goodness. Now we have to get into the definition of bias. I have this blog post where I'm tongue-in-cheek talking about all the possible different definitions of bias, including, there's a town in France called bias. Like, say what you mean by bias. There's a statistical term. It means something very, very different from what people tend to talk about in the AI space, and then it all gets mixed up because, again, one person is saying let X be that, and another person saying let X be that, and they don't define things across. A lot of the time, bias in this sense, thing people want it to mean, is algorithmic bias, or when people's lived experience affects their values, which then affect the technology that they create. Let's make it as broad, as general as possible. Now, if that's going to be our definition of bias, right? Humans make data. You should think of data as textbooks for the machine to learn from. And just like normal human textbooks, datasets have human authors. A textbook has a human author, a dataset has a human author. And if that author has an unacceptable worldview, the fruits of what they have made will be unacceptable to you. But again, what is unacceptable? Society, I really hope, evolves its views. And so in 500 years' time, in 1,000 years' time, I hope that we will be embarrassed by ourselves today. I hope so.
Hear, hear.
Right. And that means that we are changing our opinions of what's good and what's not good. And you know what we're not doing is we're not changing them all at once. Different people within society are going to be closer to where we'll end up in 500 years' time. Some will be closer than others, but there will be a distribution, a diversity of views. And so then I ask you, who in this group, who all have different views, can be allowed to speak for the many? And is there one so-called unbiased, even for now, view that will reflect humanity's tastes, preferences, morals, ethics for all eternity? It's a strange concept. But the fact that you don't have objectivity here, and you don't have one right answer, doesn't give us license to be jerks. It means that you can't punt this to a tangle of wires and go, bias, I'm going to do some mathematics and all the bias is going to go away. Well, what does that mean? Instead, it means that we have to be thoughtful, responsible, and trying our damnedest not to be jerks. And anytime someone talks about right answers, just let's zoom out all the way out of data, because people are still impressed by it. There seems to be mathematics. Like, I guess you need a graduate degree in math to be not impressed by it. I have one in mathematical statistics. I'm immune, thankfully. But out of data, let's talk about chairs. A chair is biased in some sense because it reflects the implicit values of the people who made it, who said, it's probably better for you later in life to have tight hamstrings, but be able to focus on whatever the speaker at this conference is saying, so let's put you in a chair rather than have you stand up. There's no right answer even on that decision. Like, a chair itself reflects our values. You could imagine a civilization that's like, no, we don't accept this. We don't accept those tight hamstrings and sitting around in a chair all day. We need to move around a whole lot more. No more chairs for humans. And now look at what we did. And like, wow, in that civilization, they had chairs. Look, I don't think that's our actual future, but I'm just saying, it's possible to play with these concepts. Like, what is there in this life that doesn't reflect our implicit values, our implicit attitudes as humans? That doesn't mean we get to be jerks. It means we have to be more careful, more thoughtful, and not expect that there's a formula that will solve it.
When you think about changing the frame in that way, you can also connect this with our notion from the beginning of our conversation about metasystematicity and one's choice of heuristics. Chairs themselves, the design of them can be optimized. You could have three legs, you have 4 legs, you have different heights, you could have a back, you could have not a back. You could rest on your rear, you could rest on your knees. Or you can choose not to have the chair at all, right? So there is that choice making. Is this an optimization problem? Is this a how? Or is this a why? Or why do we even have the chairs? Which I think is kind of awesome. So here I am. I don't believe in a sense of self. I do believe that I'm revising the tools in my brain to better understand reality, to have better predictive power. So I'm doing some input processing and making certain decisions, better decisions, I think, comport with reality better, have higher predictive power, and I'm trying to almost like bootstrap those meta skills, the choice making about what tool to apply. But I really think of this as a work in progress as opposed to working towards some sort of set ideal that that someone else has laid out already, right? Even the very notion of what self-improvement means, while also being very skeptical of the idea of a linear self, is just an unsolved problem. And
yeah, so I agree with you. And having thought about this a lot and gotten into decision science, exactly because, life boils down to two things. All the random stuff that happens to you that's out of your control that you couldn't have seen coming. That's just part of life. And the quality of your decisions. And so then, when I think about what I'm trying to build in myself, it's machinery, tools, and whether they are tools that are external to me, like software and hardware, or tools like ways of seeing, or taking a beat before I, blab something impulsive, whatever else, right? Tools, systems, frameworks. I try to invest in general approaches that are likely to serve me, even as my ethics mature, even as my worldview matures, as my understanding of what makes me happy evolves, as my interests change. I have to leave space to potentially pivot in the future. Right? I might wake up one day and I might decide peacocks are the thing I'm going to devote my life to. Could happen, right? And who knows? But if I've built the tools that generalize to that, where I can make that pivot, I can steer, I can process information well, I can lay out my strategy, I can understand myself and what seems to be an illusory whim and what is actually a priority. And I can solve problems effectively, and I can optimize where I need to, and I can let go where I don't. Those are the skills that, no matter what, help us live better. And so those are the ones that I've pursued, and I've ended up in statistics, AI, etc., as an extension of those skills. But it really weirds people out, because they're like, why do you love AI? Like, I'm really sorry, folks, that you do see me as an AI person, but I'm here for the decision making. And decisions at scale, that ends up in AI, and that's how I got there. But it is control of ourselves, in some sense. That is the thing I'm trying to optimize. Myself. Not others, just myself.
Well, that's beautiful and inspiring. I think there are many that wish to join you on that path.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. And I feel like, since we are it's a great place to end, since we're kind of at the end of episode time, but where can people follow you, Cassie?
I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, and I have a decision intelligence course there, and it has a very secret sounding link. I like to use bit.links, so bit.ly/wait for it, decision course. So, and that's free if you have a LinkedIn account. If you want to learn the fundamentals of AI and machine learning, and you're maybe in enterprise, a leader, a product manager, an engineer, an AI person, I have a 6.5-hour course called Making Friends with Machine Learning. And machine learning and AI, by the way, terms are used interchangeably these days, so don't let the machine learning part put you off. So it's about AI as well. And of course, we know the difference between AI and machine learning, don't we? If it's written in Python, it's probably machine learning. And if it's written in PowerPoint, it's probably AI. So yeah, I've got that 6.5-hour course on YouTube. And then on Maven, I do occasional live leadership courses that you might be able to sign up for if that's your cup of tea. Leadership, technology leadership, and AI leadership.
Thank you.
The external world data is the most relevant thing for all problems. That it's even possible to get the right data to solve every problem.
Now
this is where you ask me that question on your list.
I know.
Right.
That one about this is where you ask me, are there any situations that shouldn't use data at all?
Wow.
Oh. Or something.
Right.
You don't even have to cut this. We can just show that we don't know what we're doing.
I agree.